see. Well, I would just encourage you as administrators. I mean, I know you have a lot going on every day, and this is one more thing that you have to deal with. But I would encourage that should the community able to come together and administrators able to lead through these challenges, if there are policies or funding strategies that are funding that is making it harder for you to do your job in this time of crisis, I would encourage you to consider working with the state and doing maybe some pilot projects that could serve as opportunities for the state to relook at things that we're doing that may in fact be restricting you from serving your students. So it's just something to think about. I know you got a lot going on, and you're always putting out fires, but if there is the ability for someone within the district to take that lead and to do that, I would encourage you to do it, because I think you have lawmakers as well as regulators and others in the state who are looking for ideas and who are looking for opportunities to better serve. And I think those ideas have to come from the grassroots, because you're dealing with it every day when you go to work. And I think as you look at those challenges, I think if you had the opportunity to pitch some new ideas to the state, I think you'd have a lot of people who'd be interested in helping put those together. So just some encouragement.
Absolutely. I'll bring that back to cabinet.
Sure.
We'll
Thank you.
around.
Assemblymember Mathis.
I'd like to thank the gentleman from Kings Canyon Unified School District. I myself am a Greeley High School alumni, and I represent part of Orange Cove. So, and to echo what Assemblymember Perea just said, I mean, I know Henry's going to be leaving, but I will be around hopefully for the next decade. So, by all means, contact me. And, sir, your comments on the Delta were spot on as well. And, ma'am, my condolences. You should not be in that environment. And one of the things I look at is with our schools, with our families, what are the things that we can do to help as this drought continues? And the fact that we have people that are living in quite literally third world conditions in the state of California is just not okay with me. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
My question to Ms. Puente, you mentioned that you're not trained on how to work with and handle the pesticides. What kind of conversations are held between the workers and the employer when spraying is to occur? Are you notified in advance?
¿Qué tipo de conversaciones tiene con los empleadores sobre el uso de pesticidas y el entrenamiento? ¿Les dicen algún tipo de... ¿le dan consejos? ¿Les dicen cómo usarlos?
Hay veces que sí nos dan consejos, pero hay veces que no nos dicen nada, nomás ponen un sign afuera, pero el sign está en inglés. Entonces, las personas que estamos trabajando en el campo no hablamos inglés.
Sometimes they give us advice on how to use the pesticides, but others they just put an English sign outside, and if we don't know the language, we cannot understand what they are saying. So we just do what we think we should do.
Estuve en un caso de un pesticida porque me negué a exigir mis derechos porque acababan de tirar el pesticida y nos estaban obligando son experimentos de calabaza y querían que hiciéramos el trabajo y estaba una señora embarazada y yo le dije a ella que además yo tengo asma, entonces yo le dije a ella que cómo íbamos a hacer eso si todavía no pasaba ni siquiera 20 minutos de que tiraron el pesticida, querían que lo hiciéramos porque ellos pierden dinero si esas calabazas abren la flor antes de que sale el sol.
At one time, we had to throw some pesticides on pumpkins and crops, and it was a woman that was expecting, and I refused to do the job because I saw that it was unsafe to do that. But they asked us to do it anyway.
She was asked to apply the
Yes. Hmm. And she refused to do it.
I'm not, I didn't think that the farm workers were the ones who were supposed to apply the pesticides.
No, ella piensa que los trabajadores del campo no deberían de ser los que utilizan los pesticidas, los que los fumigan. What?
If I may just add a
Please,
translation.
please.
She was given an example of a situation where it was experimental crop, and it has to do with the pumpkins. And so in this experimental crop, they were trying to apply pesticides. And they asked these two women, Ms. Puente, who has asthma, and another woman who was pregnant, to do it. And without having the proper training, told her to apply it. So in this experimental situation, they said no, and that's why the complaint.
I see. I see. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, you should have a safe work environment, and clearly I need to better understand what occurred in that situation and what should have occurred and how it could have been done and should have been done correctly.
Que usted debería de haber tenido un mejor consejo sobre cómo haber utilizado todo eso, los pesticidas.
Creo que sí, sí debía de haber tenido pues más información, pero el supervisor que nos estaba supervisando dijo esto y no se me olvida, dijo, si no hacen el trabajo, cuando haya una oportunidad, las vamos a correr.
Yeah, I think I should have better advice on how to utilize the pesticides, but the supervisor that I had at that time said, if you don't do the job, when I have the opportunity, you're going to be fired.
We'll have to have a background talk on that after the hearing.
Van a tener que
We
conversar
have
con
a
usted
question
sobre
from Assemblymember Gallagher.
Yeah, one, I just wanted to say, I think this is a great panel because this really helps put the human face on the drought. I think a lot of times, and especially maybe for members that, sometimes I wish we had a lot more members here, members that don't have agricultural districts. When we have this impact to agriculture in that industry, a lot of times people just see numbers, but they don't see like the impact it has on families and the pressures at home of losing jobs or being worried about, hey, am I going to have a job tomorrow? The impacts to the school system, the impacts to the economy, the local economy, and people spending money locally. It's huge, and so I really appreciate you guys really highlighting those issues, and I think that helps better inform the policy-making process. Specifically to the Delta, though, I wanted to ask you, Tom, about the idea you were talking about in terms of using that stormwater for recharge purposes. Would the cost of that be that significant, considering that we do have a lot of infrastructure already that moves water out of the Delta? And I'm assuming you're talking about in the winter months when we have flows going into the Delta, we could capture some of that water, take it through existing infrastructure. And where are you talking about maybe placing that in terms of recharging basins?
I have some direct knowledge on that, which may not be comprehensive, but let me give you an idea. I live on a piece of property that has about 300 acres of ephemeral lakes on it. It was too much water, too many trees, too much variation in terrain to ever get leveled for farming. And we have a disappearing groundwater table on the north side of the McCallamy River. This is between Lodi and Galt. And after I wrote this paper that I referred to 8 years ago, I said, geez, we could do this right here. So we got organized, we talked to all the people involved, East Bay Mud, the state people, the local districts, the Audubon, the Sierra Club and everything. We've actually put in a project now to divert water that would otherwise go to waste under some unexercised filings that the North San Joaquin Water Conservation District had. That project has been completed now. Now all we're waiting for is some water to rain. And East Bay Mud's going to hold that water in Comanche Reservoir, release it to the district on their request, put it in the lakes. The local grape growers around the property are going to irrigate directly out of the lakes when the water's available instead of pumping the groundwater. And by doing some excavation in the bottom of the lakes, the groundwater penetration is going to increase. The engineers have calculated that we're going to save 5,000 acre-feet of water from groundwater pumping on an annual basis, which is precisely what the amount of overdraft is today that's being created by the city of Galt, the Galt metropolitan area's usage. So we will have solved, that groundwater overdraft problem locally. Now that was without any opposition from any interest in the community. Now when I wrote the paper in 2006, 2007, there were 225 applications for local groundwater projects before either the State Water Resources Control Board or CalFed at the time that were sitting there without funding. And it gives you some sort of an idea of the local opportunities for groundwater recharge. Now, I'm working on a program now with a bunch of interests at the Paradise Cut area down south of Tracy, which would create a improvement of that stormwater flow deal. It would protect the city of Stockton from flooding. It would spread the water out as it comes down the San Joaquin River in agricultural lands at times when they're either not being utilized or the water carries enough oxygen that the vineyards and so forth, as long as it doesn't stay, it keeps moving and stuff. Right. It's a seasonal thing, and it will do a remarkable job of increasing environmental opportunities, flood control opportunities, and water conveyance opportunities. Now, those kinds of things are available. The problem is that we've, as a state, we've got our eyes focused on these crazy, generations-old projects, which I promised I wouldn't mention here at the hearing today by name.
The T word.
And we've been diverted into thinking that this is a solution to our water problems, which it isn't, because it doesn't provide the additional water that we need to solve these problems, those problems, and everybody's problems around the state. So if we can get rid of those dreams and get onto something realistic, I think maybe we have a chance of solving these problems. Sorry for the lecture, but
It was good. The only thing I disagree with is I think we need to do a little bit of both.
Well,
I think a sites combined with what you're talking about would work very well. But yeah.
I have no problem with sites. I think the one where they divert the water directly from Shasta down into sites would be better than coming up through the river, but we could talk about that some other time.
There's a lot of offline thought there.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no further questions, I want to thank you for your preparation and for being here today and to be informative to this hearing. Really appreciate you. Thank you.
I'm going to seal some water.
Yes. Don't waste it. Can you check in with that lady after and just talk with her a little bit? I was like, oh shit, I don't want to sound insensitive like. The third panel is on adaptive strategies to mitigate drought impact, and we have David Zoldowski, the Director of Center for Irrigation Technology at Cal State University, Fresno. Robert Say, State Broadband Coordinator, Strategy for Ag Technology and Innovation with the United States Department of Ag, California Rural Development. Third, we have Daniel Mountjoy, Director of Resource Stewardship and Sustainable Conservation. Fourth, Tim Johnson, President and Chief Executive Officer with the California Rice Commission. And David Daly, owner-operator of Daly Cattle. And I believe David Daly needed to make his presentation first. And we're happy to have you here today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I appreciate it, and thank you also for allowing me to go just a little earlier. I think Ann's aware that there's been some challenges at home, so I need to move fairly quickly after I leave here, but thank you. I want to approach this slightly differently and try not to be redundant and also be brief at the same time. The California Cattleman, I am a producer, California cattle industry. I'm also the first vice president of our California Cattlemen's Association. I have another role serving as the interim dean of the College of Agriculture at CSU Chico, so I was trained as an animal scientist. So I look at this at multiple ways. I like to address this primarily as a producer. I'm a fifth generation producer in Butte County, California. So Butte, Yuba, and Plumas is where I run cows. We happen to be in a wet part of the state, or it's supposed to be. Our permits for cattle to go to the national forest and to the logging and to private ground is east of Orville on the Plumas National Forest. That's roughly 100,000 acres of summer range that should be filling the Lake Orville in a normal year. I run between the south and the middle fork of the Feather. So we would expect normally 90 to 100 inches of rainfall in that area. So where the wet part should be. I drive across Orville Dam or close to it every single day. So obviously I get to see what the rest of the state is dealing with with an empty reservoir. So my background in terms of a producer, some of the things that have impacted us directly is we really run in those marginal lands on both sides of the valley, the California cattle industry. I'm a range producer. We don't irrigate typically. We work on what the natural rainfall should provide or we expect provides. And so we end up dealing with essentially the Oakland savanna, the foothills up to the pine timber is where we anticipate that we're going to run cows. We don't have an option to irrigate. Most of California's surface water will cross California's working landscapes, our range operations. And that's what we have to protect and are very proud of how we've managed. It's the home to most of the state's endangered species. It's a place for carbon sequestration. It's a place that we need to protect. Just as a quick aside, I was asked in my role, not as a producer, but as the dean of a college, well, can we talk about the water shortage? And they came to interview me, local journalists. And I talked to them about a shortage of feed. I talked to them about hauling water, and they said, why don't you just irrigate those hills? That's our lack of understanding in terms of what we're dealing with. And that's from someone, luckily, I don't think that one made it to press, we're hoping. But that's the understanding that we deal with. So we're faced with a situation where, personally, I'm on the Plumas National Forest. We had a 20% cut in our AUMs, our animal unit months, our 20% less in terms of the cattle we could take up this year. That was standard throughout most of the Sierra Nevada, so it was a fifth of our ability to move to those ranges. The private land, Sierra Pacific Logging Corporation, who I also lease ground from, did the same thing, another 20%. So we removed 20% of our operation or our summer feed in one regulatory decision that was not necessarily based on science. And those are some of the things that we deal with on a regular basis. In addition to that impact, for the first time, I'm on the east side of the Sierra, or the east side of the Sacramento Valley. So for the first time in my life, and I remember the 75 to 77 drought pretty well. I was a senior in high school, but we never had to haul water then. We're hauling water, drinking water for the very first time. There's an inability to fill stock ponds. It's a pretty dramatic impact that impacts us in a situation where we've had to see liquidation of cow herds from California, and this is throughout the state. One of the things that people I don't think connect to. Think of it more as a permanent crop. You can't replace that genetics. I can think of one major producer in California who moved 600 cows to Nebraska. They won't come back. That was $1 million move, $100,000 just in trucking. It's the potential for that impact to the economy. Now, he's still keeping an operation here, and I hope he stays because he's one of our best in the state. But 600 cows is a pretty significant impact to a local economy if you talk $1 million in calf sales a year from one small community. So what we'll see as a challenge is we see this, and just sitting here, the complexity of this issue is so overwhelming. Good luck, folks. I mean, it is a huge challenge, and I realize there are no simple solutions, but we are faced with a situation in rural communities that we have to think creatively, and I think our great concerns are that the solution could become the problem, and I'm speaking as a producer, that well-intentioned solutions may cause greater problems for us. And as a first Vice President of California Cattlemen, there's probably 3 things they would ask me to speak to. And I realize this is not one that's going to have unanimous support around the table, but water storage is a thing that our members still believes, whether it's a solution or not, it's a partial solution. More cups on the table, more sources. And I know Assemblyman Gallagher's raised the issue already of sites. Frankly, I'll tell you, our membership who voted for Prop 1A with a heavy lift by much of agriculture feels it was a bait and switch. That I feel a lot of pressure when I go out and talk to our members that it will never happen because the state doesn't have the political wherewithal to get it done. And we recently, at our California Cattlemen's Convention about 3 weeks ago, actually passed a staff directive instructing our staff in Sacramento to raise the issue on water storage every single opportunity they can. Get us updated, let us know where you are, let us know if it really has an opportunity to move forward. And I recognize it's not a single solution, and I'm not suggesting that, but I assure you in our part of the world, Assemblyman Gallagher, you have great support for anything you can say about sites on a continuing basis. And you'll probably get that continually from our people. And then secondly, I think we are greatly concerned about the level of regulation that we deal with, both from the State Regional Water Quality Control Board and the regional boards themselves, who act independently and put us in onerous situations simply to meet regulations and frequently without science. And that's an ongoing problem that our members are concerned about with water. We've had several challenges recently. Some of you may have participated last year or heard about the Grazing Regulatory Action Program, for example. So regulations are a concern for us. And then thirdly, there is great concern that in this time of severe drought, a very complex issue, we can't look for simple solutions when it comes to water rights and historic water rights and what those may mean to us as producers and people who work in rural economies. Frankly, changing those water rights significantly could collapse rural economies significantly. So those are our greatest concerns, and if I were to reiterate those, it'd be water storage, the level of regulation, and then what we do in terms of whichever last one I just offered. And I'm sorry, but I really do have to run fairly quickly, and I apologize, but it is a personal family issue.
We're grateful that you're here and that you were able to do this.
Well, thank you, and thanks
contribute.
for inviting
Thank you
me.
very much. You're very welcome. Thank you. Next, we have David Zoldowski, Director for the Center for Irrigation Technology at Cal State University, Fresno.
And thank you for inviting me here today. And I think our assignment was adoptive strategies to mitigate drought's impact. So I'm going to share some thoughts primarily on farm about that. And there are things we can do. I know we get kind of drug into some of these giant issues, and there's a lot that can be done and should be done, and I'll address those. While I'm here representing Fresno State today, I also represent the Cal State University system. We have 23 campuses and 300 or 400 faculty members actively involved in water issues across the whole spectrum of saltwater intrusion to constructed wetlands to obviously irrigation. So think of us as a resource for the state. I think sometimes we are a best kept secret, and I want to assure you that through our water resources and policy initiative, which the chancellor initiated in 2008, we are ready and able to help the state through these difficult times. So with that, I want to start off by talking a bit about basin efficiency and on-farm efficiency. My conversation today is going to be about on-farm efficiency. Those two concepts get interchanged. We do get basin efficiencies that are quite high, and what that really means that over-applied water goes back to the groundwater and is not lost and can be reused another time. On-farm efficiency, which the grower uses to grow the crop, is a different matter, and I think that's what I'm going to address today. There are lots of opportunities there, I believe, to improve water use efficiency on farm. It has multiple benefits. One of the questions I like to ask panels like this is, who believes that drip irrigation uses less water? And most of the time everybody raises their hands when in fact drip irrigation plants use more water. And so you should understand that there's this big myth out there that somehow drip uses less water. Now, how can that be? Well, it's more efficient in the sense that all the plants get more uniform applied water and we get yield increases, and that's why you hear about increased production with drip irrigation. It's not because the crops use less water, but the plants actually use more water. What it does do when it's operated correctly and maintained correctly is that the system then applies water more uniform and less water moves beyond the root zone, which we can see with flood irrigation. But that's not to say that drip irrigations can't be mismanaged and don't waste water. Lots of them do, and we've got lots of data to show that. Additionally, we like to also make sure that when we talk about recharge, that is with surface water. When you're using groundwater and inefficient with it, all you're doing is recirculating the groundwater back to the ground. And so there's no net benefit to the groundwater. In fact, there is a net negative to that. And how does that occur? One is that if we over-irrigate with groundwater, we tend to degrade the water quality. We take with it pesticides, chemicals, other things that might be found in the agronomic growing of the crops. So be mindful that when you hear that you need to understand the source of the water, because if we're inefficient with groundwater, there's no recharge per se. In fact, I would say the other cost to that is pumping costs, because what happens is there's a latency or a time delay from the time that over-irrigation occurs at the crop and below the root zone and the years it may take to re-enter the groundwater. And during that time, there's a delta in increased groundwater lift because that water hasn't recharged yet, and so you're actually lifting up from the decrease in groundwater level. So be mindful of that as well. I want to talk to you about what we like to call our 3 big ideas, what we really think are the things to focus on if we want to improve on-farm water use efficiency. The first being pumping efficiency. You now know that probably the majority of the water used to irrigate agriculture in California is from groundwater, since the surface waters currently have been significantly reduced. And so relatively small changes and increase in pumping efficiency can provide large increases in water efficiency, energy efficiency, and some affect water efficiency. Fresno State manages a program for PG&E called the Ag Pump Efficiency Program, and currently we are reducing pump runtime by 2 million kilowatt hours a month through that program and conservation on a 1-year basis. After that 1 year that we are able to benchmark, those savings continue on for the growers or for the utilities. We actually provide the same services to the utilities. What does that really mean? It means that the average pumping efficiency in California is somewhere between 53 and 55% efficient. Theoretically, you can be up to 65 or more. What you've got is losses in the motor, heat, bearings, and pump efficiency losses combined. Our average pump efficiency of about 25 or 30,000 pump tests that we've performed through our program is in the 53 to 55% efficient. And pumps that we encourage to get repaired are down around, when we started the program 10 or 12 years ago, was down around 40% when the repair would occur. And we've been able to, through education to farmers in water districts, move that up to 45%. So we've increased the pumping efficiency on pumps that are repaired by 5%. That's a big number when you think about the 100,000 ag wells that are out there. But along with that, our estimate is that maybe 1/3 of the ag wells have water meters. And I would encourage this group to consider advocating for water meters. I know that's a hotly debated question, mostly because I agree that once the meters are in and we report the groundwater extraction, we will be taxed on that, and that water will be used to enforce, I'm sure, the groundwater or the SGMA. But at some point, it's the tragedy of the commons. If we don't get a hold of that, we're going to be out of business anyway. So along those lines, there is obviously another 70,000 ag wells that can have water meters on it. Why is that important? Not only to tell you what you're putting on the field, because what gets measured gets managed. And there's a reason why the legislature has required all urban users to have water meters, and how we can benchmark water conservation, water management. But more importantly, beyond just the idea of knowing how much water you put on, it's change in pumping conditions. When we see the flow rates change in a well, that alerts us almost immediately that something is degraded in the system. Now, it might be a falling water table, it might be a plugged filter, it might be a worn pump, but it alerts the operator then that to take action immediately, and not at the end of the year when they look at how long they've run their pump and say, gee, I ran 20% longer this year. Why was that? And so that potential savings from a 3 or 4% degradation in the operating efficiency to maybe 10 or 15% can be caught early and maintain better use efficiency both with our water and energy resources. And that's important to everybody in the state, including the grower. And many of these irrigation systems, particularly in drip micro, again, are dedicated to a certain flow and pressure. And as those systems degrade, the flow and pressures then are not appropriate for that design of that system. Drip systems are highly touted as being efficient and come in at 90% or higher. Two things are of interest to that. Almost none of these systems are ever tested when they are installed and operated for the first time for how well they are distributing the water. It's an assumption. It's a back of the envelope calculation. And secondly, and probably most concerning to this committee, should be that those systems do degrade over time. We've got lots and lots of data of the 3 million or plus drip microsystems out there. That 10, 15 years down the road, they might be 30, 40% efficient, not 80 or 90, and in fact, sometimes they can be much worse than adjacent surface irrigation systems because the emitters do plug, and what do? We continue to run the system a little longer to overcome those non-uniformities, and all the benefits that are touted to drip and micro are lost. And so one of the things we want to really promote is education, and I'm going to close with that right after I get past the third leg of the stool. So maintenance is very, very important to drip micro and understanding how to evaluate those systems. And then thirdly, water management. In fact, that's the low-hanging fruit. We see lots of conversations about drip emitters and other things that allow to manage that system. If you don't have a flow meter, it doesn't, having a soil moisture reading doesn't really tell you if that number actually corresponds to what the crop should have been applied in that given day. It just tells you what water is available at that location. Those devices can be very expensive. You may only have 1 in 40 acres, and so you really are taking a very educated guess as to what the management should be on that. So I want to encourage that that education, when the state provides funding for equipment, that education be a component of that. If you get a piece of equipment that's been subsidized or rebated and you don't know how to operate it properly, almost assuredly, you're not going to get the full benefit. I would liken that to my phone. It has many, many features that I just don't know how to use and may or may not ever use. I'm on a need-to-knows, and I would suggest to you that's very similar with lots of irrigation equipment, water meters, soil moisture sensors, weather data, et cetera. So, and I know that the programs that are being run by the state primarily focus on equipment and matching funds, but I would strongly suggest to this committee that education, there's a reason we have universities and extension, and that is to make sure that things are done properly and that at the end of the day, we get full benefit from our investment. And the last thing I would say is that the whole idea of getting water meters on all our wells, and from the standpoint of the state's rationale, because we're never very targeted or strategic, in my view, on how we provide these rebate systems. They're pretty much scattered across many, many areas, and that is, at the end of the day, if in fact SGMA requires the reporting of groundwater extraction, the state then has instituted a plan to make sure that every well has a water meter. So when that day comes, that data is important to have. What have we done? We've created the backbone or the infrastructure to make sure that data is available. And as I heard earlier speakers say, and I would support this 100%, is that we don't have enough data to manage our water supplies on farm and off farm, and we've got to move in that direction. So sorry if I've gone long, but I want to make sure I got the whole story in.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. And next we have Robert Say, State Broadband Coordinator for the Strategy for Ag Technology and Innovation with the United States Department of Ag, California Rural Development.